Good afternoon, I'm Bakhtiar Sanova and you're watching A News. Now the major stories making headlines today. Mike Carney's Liberals win the Canadian election and seal a remarkable comeback. US President Donald Trump wants permanent ceasefire in Ukraine, White House says. Power gradually restored in Spain and Portugal after major blackout. Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney is on track to win the federal election, according to early projections. His Liberal Party wins the election after a campaign dominated by US President Donald Trump's threats and economic pressure. However, it remains unclear whether the Liberals will form a minority or majority government.
Millions of Canadians went to the polls on Monday in an election heavily influenced by US tariffs and President Donald Trump's controversial call for Canada to become the 51st American state. Voting officially ended across the country, from the Atlantic provinces to British Columbia, and counting quickly got underway.
All of you, Canada, get ready. Our CBC News...
Early results showed the Liberals leading in 90 seats, while the Conservatives were ahead in 64. A majority government requires winning 172 of the 343 seats in Parliament.
It is not yet clear at this hour.
The election marked a major comeback for the Liberals, who earlier this year had trailed the Conservatives by as much as 20 points. That changed following Justin Trudeau's resignation and Trump's intervention, which shifted the political landscape. Mark Carney, a political newcomer but internationally respected economist, became Prime Minister in March after succeeding Trudeau. He campaigned on promises of taking a tougher stance toward Washington and reducing Canada's economic dependence on the US, asking voters for a strong mandate. Meanwhile, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre focused his campaign on domestic issues such as the rising cost of living and crime, arguing that after 9 years of Liberal rule, Canada was broken. At the time, Parliament was dissolved. The Liberals held 152 seats, the Conservatives 120, the Bloc Québécois 33, the New Democrats 24, and the Greens 2. More than 7 million Canadians voted early, setting a record for advanced turnout. However, final results could take longer to confirm, especially in key battlegrounds such as Ontario's 905 region and British Columbia, where polls closed later. Whether the Liberals secure an outright majority or must govern as a minority will depend heavily on these late results.
President Donald Trump is taking steps to ease pressure on U.S. automakers, unveiling plans to scale back some tariffs on imported car parts. The move comes amid mounting industry concerns and ahead of his visit to Michigan.
U.S. President Donald Trump's administration is set to ease the impact of his automotive tariffs, announcing plans on Tuesday to reduce some import duties on foreign parts used in U.S. manufactured vehicles. The new measures aim to prevent overlapping tariffs on imported vehicles and provide relief for domestic automakers, many of whom had raised concerns about rising production costs. The move is seen as an effort to support American manufacturing while maintaining the broader goals of the administration's trade strategy. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick called the move a major victory for Trump's trade policy, saying it supports U.S. automakers and workers while encouraging domestic production. The announcement comes ahead of Trump's visit to Michigan, where automakers had anticipated relief amid concerns over rising costs from tariffs. The Wall Street Journal was first to report on the administration's move, which signals a shift toward more targeted tariff relief aimed at balancing trade enforcement with support for U.S. industry.
India and the United States have made positive progress in recent trade negotiations, according to a statement from India's Commerce Ministry on Tuesday. The two sides are working toward finalizing the first phase of a bilateral trade agreement by fall 2025. The talks follow a visit by India to India by U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance and come as Washington signals optimism about potential deals with key trading partners. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said Monday that several countries had made very good offers to avoid new tariffs and suggested India could be among the first to reach a formal agreement, possibly as early as this week or next. However, he provided no specific timeline or details. Russian President Vladimir Putin has declared a unilateral three-day ceasefire in May in the ongoing war with Ukraine. The announcement comes as the White House confirmed that U.S. President Donald Trump is pushing for a permanent end to the conflict. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said on Monday that the president believes now is the time to stop the fighting for good.
Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin.
The Kremlin declared a new unilateral ceasefire. Russian President Vladimir Putin, speaking at a meeting of the Council of Legislators in St. Petersburg, said that the 72-hour truce is set to begin at the start of 8th May and run until the end of 10th May. This date marks the 80th anniversary of the Soviet Union's victory alongside its allies in World War II. It follows an earlier, short-lived Easter ceasefire, which both sides accused each other of repeatedly violating. Ukraine's Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha responded, saying Ukraine is ready to support a lasting, durable and full ceasefire. However, he stressed that if Russia truly wants peace, it should immediately halt its ongoing attacks. Ukrainian Foreign Ministry spokesman Georgy Tykhy stated that if Russia truly seeks peace, it should cease fire immediately.
Why wait until May 8th? If the fire can be ceased now, and since any date for 30 days, so it is a real ceasefire, not just one for a parade. And Ukraine is ready to support a lasting, durable and full ceasefire. Of course, Ukraine's position is consistent, and we think that Moscow needs to be asked why they do not reciprocate the Ukrainian proposal, the Ukrainian acceptance of a full ceasefire, because if they accepted it, it could have already started, and we would have silence and, of course, some confidence-building measures, as Minister Sybiha repeats clearly many times, and this would pave the way to a real long-term settlement.
US President Donald Trump wants to see a permanent ceasefire to ending Russia's war in Ukraine. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said.
He is increasingly frustrated with leaders of both countries. He wants to see a permanent ceasefire. I understand Vladimir Putin this morning offered a temporary ceasefire. The president has made it clear he wants to see a permanent ceasefire first to stop the killing, stop the bloodshed. And while he remains optimistic he can strike a deal, he's also being realistic as well.
As of now, there are no signs of formal negotiations linked to the newly announced ceasefire, and the situation along the front lines remains tense.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Monday that the world did not want to wait until May 8th for Kremlin leader Vladimir Putin's announced ceasefire in the more than three-year-old war, only to be in effect for a few days. In his nightly address, Zelensky called for a full and unconditional ceasefire for at least 30 days to provide a basis for real diplomacy. Zelensky also said that an agreement with the United States on developing Ukraine's minerals had become, quote, stronger, more equitable after negotiations between the two sides. Greece is asking the European Commission to exempt 500 million euros from its 2026 defense budget under a special clause that allows flexibility. The amount is less than 0.3% of its GDP. A new European Union plan would let countries raise military funding by up to 1.5% of GDP annually for 4 years without penalties, even if deficits rise above 3%. Greece already allocates around 3% to defense, nearly double the EU average. It aims to invest 25 billion euros by 2036 to modernize its forces and keep pace with Turkey. Power is gradually coming back across Spain and Portugal after a massive blackout triggered widespread disruption on Monday. While electricity has returned to many areas, the cause of the outage remains unclear as investigations continue.
Electricity supplies are slowly returning across parts of Spain and Portugal after a major, unprecedented blackout caused widespread chaos on Monday. The outage disrupted daily life for tens of millions of people across the Iberian Peninsula, halting subway trains, paralyzing traffic systems, severing phone and internet connections, and shutting down ATM machines. By early Tuesday, over 87% of power had been restored in Spain, with all affected substations back online as residents cheered the return of electricity. Spain's Interior Ministry declared a state of emergency in several regions, including Madrid and parts of the south. Portugal's Prime Minister Luís Montenegro, following a late-night emergency cabinet meeting, declared an energy crisis. The outage disrupted key institutions like Spain's Parliament and the Madrid Open, while essential services in Portugal relied on backup generators. Police were deployed to manage traffic in cities where lights failed. Still, it remains unclear exactly what triggered the failure. Some reports linked the blackout to a rare, induced atmosphere vibration affecting Spain's power lines, but REN later denied these claims. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez, who visited Red Eléctrica's headquarters during recovery efforts, reiterated that there was no indication of a cyber attack and that the issue did not originate in Portugal.
What has caused this sudden disappearance of supply? This is something that specialists have not yet been able to determine, but they will. And the relevant state institutions and all private operators are working together to understand what has happened. All potential causes are being analysed. I insist again, without ruling out any hypothesis, any possibility.
Though the total number affected remains unclear, the blackout is one of the most severe to hit the Iberian Peninsula, home to around 60 million people. The full investigation into the origin of the outage remains ongoing.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan is in Rome for a higher-level summit aimed at deepening ties between Turkey and Italy. Invited by Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, this marks the fourth intergovernmental meeting between the two nations. President Erdogan was warmly welcomed by Prime Minister Meloni at the historic Villa Doria Pampili, a 17th century residence where the summit is taking place. The two leaders held a private meeting behind closed doors ahead of the main talks. The summit focuses on boosting cooperation in key sectors including trade, defense and cultural exchange. Several bilateral agreements are expected to be signed, reinforcing the legal framework of relations between Ankara and Rome. A major international conference on Afghanistan concluded in Baku, where representatives from 20 countries discussed regional security and development, aiming to support Afghanistan's path to stability.
In Baku, officials from 20 countries gathered for the Afghanistan Regional Connectivity, Security and Development Conference, organized by Azerbaijan's State Security Service to discuss Afghanistan's future. Colonel General Ali Nagiev opened the conference, stressing its importance in building a stable, law-abiding Afghanistan. He highlighted Azerbaijan's long-standing support for international efforts to stabilize the country and combat terrorism and organized crime. The conference also underscored the need for global cooperation in addressing Afghanistan's challenges, from terrorism to illegal migration. The representatives shared a unified vision: Afghanistan's peaceful integration into the international community and the importance of joint efforts in promoting long-term stability.
Azerbaijan and Iran vowed to deepen economic cooperation at a business forum held Monday at the Heydar Aliyev Center in Baku, attended by Presidents Ilham Aliyev and Masoud Pezeshkian. President Ilham Aliyev hailed the visit as a success, highlighting the signing of a joint declaration aimed at strengthening bilateral ties. He called for greater trade, investment and joint projects noting that economic relations had not yet matched the strength of political ties. More than 400 business representatives from both countries participated in the forum. President Ilham Aliyev invited Iranian companies to contribute to major infrastructure projects in Azerbaijan. President Pezeshkian, in his remarks, emphasized the importance of regional cooperation, suggesting the creation of stronger transport and trade corridors linking Azerbaijan and Iran and neighboring countries. Both leaders stressed that stronger economic and cultural ties would reinforce peace, security, and prosperity across the region. Today is the day 2 of the Global South NGO Platform Conference, where delegates from over 110 countries continue talks under the theme Solidarity in Action. Our colleague Orkan Amashov brings us the updates from the venue. Orkan, big day at the forum. Can you tell us about the key highlights of the day 2 and briefly wrap up the event?
Indeed. Yes, indeed. Global South NGO platform has been established in Azerbaijan. The fact of the establishment happened yesterday on day 1, and today, actually, the Global South NGO Forum is drawing to an end. It's practically over. So let's walk through what happened on the 28th and 29th of April. First of all, yesterday, during the last minutes of the opening ceremony, the announcement was made to the effect of Global South NGO platform being created with the acquiescence of all the participants, and then late afternoon, by virtue of the agreement expressed by civil society representatives coming from 116 countries belonging to Global South, the leadership of the platform was entrusted to Azerbaijan with Ramin Iskandarli, who happens to be the chairman of the board of Azerbaijani National NGO, actually being entrusted with the task of being acting Secretary General of this platform. There will be 1 year interim period during the course of which Azerbaijan will be operating, will be establishing, entrenching all of those institutional mechanisms. The working document of the platform was also adopted on the 28th of April, and of course General Assembly will take place probably this time in 2026. And today was another very important day, of course. There were many panel discussions related to issues involving the role of Global South NGOs, to what extent they could be actually effective and instrumental in sorting out some of the problems that governments failed to resolve over the past years, and to what extent the synergy between government actors and also non-governmental organizations could be maintained. There was one panel discussion related to D8 Organization of Economic Cooperation, which is largely viewed as an integral element of the wider Global South region and geography. And also, most importantly today, around lunchtime, 10 memorandums of understanding have been signed, and they were signed between Azerbaijani NGOs and NGOs belonging to the Global South region and geography. So practically within the course of 2 days, something quite considerable has happened, and everything seems to be very complete. Early morning on 28th of April, this first ever inaugural Global South NGO Forum convened. It started, it kicked off, and the whole intention behind this forum was to establish this platform, which has been established, working document has been adopted, and many analysts and observers and participants have reflected very extensively on the message delivered by Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev to the participants of the forum, and which effectively was one of the key elements of the discussion rubric and scope that dominated both 28th of April and today, which is a day 2 of the Global South NGO Forum. That's all for now. Orkan Amashov, A News.
President of Georgia Mikhail Kavelashvili met Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan in Yerevan, reaffirming support for South Caucasus peace efforts. Kavelashvili hailed the conclusion of negotiation on the text of the peace deal between Baku and Yerevan as a historic step. He also stressed the importance of ongoing trilateral cooperation following a recent meeting of the Georgian, Armenian and Azerbaijani foreign ministers in Tbilisi. Kavelashvili stressed that Georgia remains committed to advancing dialogue and supporting initiatives that strengthen regional stability and welfare. A high-level defense meeting between Turkey and the United States has taken place in Ankara as both nations aim to strengthen military ties and address pressing security challenges across the region and beyond. Delegations from Turkey and the United States convened in Ankara for the latest round of the high-level defense group meeting. Leading the talks were Major General İlkay Altındağ, Director General for Defense and Security at Turkey's Ministry of Defense, and Catherine Thompson, Acting Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Security Affairs. The two sides discussed expanding cooperation in defense and the defense industry, exchanged views on regional and global security threats, and reaffirmed their commitment to deepening their strategic partnership. Turkey's Ministry of National Defense noted that the next meeting will be held in the United States next year, with both countries emphasizing the need for ongoing dialogue in the face of evolving security dynamics. Leaders and lawmakers from across NATO member states and partner countries are gathered in Turkey this week for an important seminar on security and economic challenges facing the Gulf, the Middle East, and the Sahel region. The event, organized by the NATO Parliamentary Assembly's Mediterranean and Middle East Special Group, officially opened Monday in Antalya's Belek Tourism Center. The NATO Parliamentary Assembly Mediterranean and Middle East Special Group's Economic and Security Commission seminar officially commenced Monday in Antalya's Belek Tourism Center. The three-day seminar brings together representatives from NATO countries, Azerbaijan, Gulf nations, and Arab states to assess regional developments and their broader impact on NATO's security framework. Speaking to reporters, Mevlut Çavuşoğlu, chairman of the Turkish delegation to the NATO Parliamentary Assembly and former foreign minister, stressed Turkey's growing influence on the global stage.
Turkey has become an extremely important country in diplomacy and security, especially amid the rapid changes globally. Turkey remains an indispensable NATO ally and one of the top contributors. It is very important that the Western world has recently begun to understand Turkey's significance. But Turkey's importance should not only be acknowledged when needed, it should not be forgotten after the need disappears.
Batı dünyasının Türkiye'nin önemini anlamaya başlaması da
Çavuşoğlu criticized the Western partners for what he described as periodic neglect of Turkey's role after phases of close cooperation. He also cautioned against exclusionary approaches when discussing the future of Europe's security architecture. Highlighting Turkey's ongoing diplomatic efforts, Çavuşoğlu announced that next month Turkey will host a NATO foreign ministers meeting in Istanbul, chaired by Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan, following high-profile events like the Antalya Diplomacy Forum. Afghanistan is seeing fresh signs of international interest in its investment opportunities as both Indian and Russian private sector investors signal their eagerness to engage. Tamim Bahis has more from Kabul.
Big powers set their sights on Afghanistan, identifying investment opportunities and perspectives for economic cooperation. During a high-level meeting in Kabul, the acting foreign minister of Afghanistan told officials from India's Ministry of External Affairs that conditions in Afghanistan are now favorable for investment. He invited Indian businesses to take part in Afghanistan's rebuilding efforts. Discussions also focused on boosting trade and transit ties and on easing visa procedures for Afghan patients, students, and business people. Indian officials in turn expressed interest in investing in new projects and completing earlier ones, reaffirming India's commitment to its relationship with Afghanistan. Meanwhile, in the north of the country, private sector investors from Russia visited Balkh province, where they announced plans to invest $500 million to establish a major oil extraction plant in partnership with a local Afghan company. Provincial officials pledged a full cooperation to support the project. These developments highlight growing confidence in Afghanistan's investment landscape as the country works to strengthen its economy and build new international partnerships. This is Tamim Bahis in Kabul for A News.
That's all we have for this hour. Thank you for joining us and keep watching A News.